Okay, so we're gonna try this online streaming again. I think last time I streamed from Facebook directly, and that was not good to do. So we're gonna do something a little bit different tonight. It's gonna pop up and do this live stream on YouTube and Facebook. Um, but let me pull up both my phones and try to pull up um, stuff so I can see it. Okay, there we go. Okay, then I can see everything, and then I'm gonna check my YouTube to make sure that we're good to go. So before I get started, tomorrow night, Speak Woman Speak, we are hosting our first kickoff women's Bible study. It'll be tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can go to speakwomanspeak.org, SPEAK.org, speakwomanspeak.org. And its membership is free. I'm like, Lord, did I forget how to spell? And but it's going to be amazing. It'll be tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's all about reigniting passion. Super excited. We're going to be having some breakout chat also that we can really kind of deep dive. But I wanted to do a video about today's topic on my Facebook. And I know I rarely do live streams and pop ups, but I definitely wanted to do this topic because it's something that I think is a great conversation to have when it comes to criticism. Because what I've realized over the I'm going to stress this, years, is that many leaders, they have the wrong perspective about criticism and how to handle people that are not understanding basically, what you're doing, right? Your vision. So I wanted to spend the night kind of having a little heart to heart. I'm going to actually keep this video up. Usually I delete them, but I'm going to keep this one up, but we'll see. We'll see how long I keep it up. But if you're watching online, be sure to say hi in the comments just so I can see who's watching. But let's talk about this. So I posted a selfie today with a caption that was talking about criticism and how many times people who have never understood risk have the most to say, right? And I've learned this in business, ministry, all sorts of stuff. Um, People love to talk, right? Who never have done the things that you're doing, and you don't even have to be doing something that is very public, right? I'm someone who's really big into private moves, and just making a ton of impact, and you don't have to know my name, right? As long as I'm respected in my space and I'm doing what I'm doing. And so you get people who tell you, oh, well, you could be doing this and it could be bigger. You could be doing that and you could be doing this. And people always are telling you what you could be doing. And I always say, well, if I could be doing it, why don't you do it? Right? Hey, Miss Congeniality, why don't you do it? If it's so easy, if it's so whatever, why don't you do it? If you are telling me that, oh, this business is so easy and all I need to do is blah, 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 blah. Well, then why don't you show me, right? People always have, something to talk about of what you should be doing, right? And so I've learned over the years, and I've now with nothing, it doesn't really phase me when I have certain things happen. But I wanted to share for especially my new entrepreneurs, those who are just building up tough skin, whether you're in business and ministry, just like how do you have this perspective? So I want to share a couple of things in today's post on my Facebook. If you're not following me on Facebook, I kind of redid my Facebook, right? I used to have all the friends, 5,000 friends, all this stuff. I was posting all the time. Don't really do too much, but I do share now things that are really on my heart that are very important. And in today's post with critics, I pointed out three different Bible examples that I want to touch on tonight that I really think, if you haven't deep dive into what I wrote, it's going to help you. The first is Joshua and Caleb, which Kiana had commented on today's post about because, it's such a powerful story. And if you're not familiar with the story in the Bible, Joshua and Caleb, Moses was searching out the land, right, for the promised land. And Joshua and Caleb was of the group of the spies and went out to go look at this land that God had promised. And Joshua and Caleb, when they came back to report, there were these huge giants, and they were like, well, we got them, we can overtake them. These two men who were on fire, not just for God, but to obtain the promise. But the 10 others that were of the spy group were weak. They had no faith. They said, you know what? No, they're too big. We can't overtake them. And so they didn't pursue it at that time. And the reason why I can relate to that story, and I put it in with today's focus, is that one of the first things that I realized as a growing leader, remember when I was 19, I first started, kind of merging out. At 19, that's when I started online ministry. That's when I started doing, kind of growing into who God had called me to be. And that's when, God began to raise me up, and I began traveling and speaking and all that great stuff. But the first thing that I realized among the land of critics was that when you start talking about big things, it starts to make people who don't have faith really nervous. It's like it's one thing to talk about things that are doable. Like something you could do in like the next couple of days, something that doesn't require anything, of you to change, anything of you to, change the way that you move and change some of the goals that you have. But when you start talking about like things that require great levels of risk, things that really require faith, that, there is kind of like, those things that are so big that, it kind of makes you question, like, will it really happen, and is this actually possible? I've noted over at least my short years of doing what I do, that when you start to talk really big, it makes people who have no faith really nervous. And that's usually one of the phases you go through in leadership when people fall off. And it's a good thing when people fall off who have no faith, because you never want those people in your camp. You don't want people in your camp who only ride with you when things are doable, because those are usually not risk takers. You want risk takers around you, because that's what makes great leadership, is when you're able to identify risk that's worth it. Risks that will challenge and evolve you and not keep you complacent. But when you're around people who just love to talk all day, they love to talk big, but they don't like to take risks. They love to hypothesize. I always say the one thing I can't stand is a philosopher that doesn't like to walk. What I mean by that is, these are people, they can talk all day about what they want to do. They can give you 100 task lists, but they never do the work. They never ever do the work. Those are the worst kinds of big movers and shakers and game changers. I always tell people, you're not changing the game because you write a couple Facebook posts and because you drop some name drop posts or points of view or even things about God, and you go viral. That's great, but what have you built? If you haven't built anything, I'm not impressed by anybody who has no fruit, right? So it's one of those things where a lot of people can talk, but who is taking risk, right? So when you think about Joshua and Caleb, they were ready to risk. They were ready to say, you know what, let's go after it. But the 10 were so of weak minds that they killed that moment. And again, if you know the story, they had to wait for 40 years until that thing came back around, where, as Caleb said, give me my mountain, right? So that is one example of how you really have to some people, you got to just let them leave your life. You got to kick them out, listen, whatever way they need to go, because you cannot have people who are dead weight. They will those are the kind of critics. Those are, oh my goodness. And these are people, people you may have ran with, but you cannot allow your leadership, you cannot allow your calling, your giftings, your abilities, your business to be stifled by people who are not willing to take risks. I'm telling you, do not want people who can hypothesize and they love to talk business, but they don't take any risks. Nope. The next one I pointed out in my post today was Nehemiah. And, that's one of my favorite stories, Nehemiah, where, the Lord had called him to go back to his city that was in ruins and to rebuild the wall, to rebuild what had fallen. And the reason why I love that was because that story literally points out direct critics who were telling him, basically what you're doing, it's a waste of time. You don't need to be doing it. And Nehemiah, he has that quote that I love in the Bible in Nehemiah where he says, I'm doing a great work and I can't come down. And that is a scripture that you need to drill in your heart, right? I'm doing a great work and I literally cannot come down. Okay. I cannot come down. And this is where for some people, if when we talk about leadership, and I tell this to my mentees all the time, and I want to pull up, give me 1 second. I want to pull up this for you guys really quickly though, just so you guys can have that specific scripture. It's Nehemiah 6:3. So Nehemiah 6:3 is where that specific scripture is found when Nehemiah where he says, I'm doing a great work and I cannot come down. But the reason why I brought that up is that one of the things I teach my mentees all the time is that leaders do not constantly go up and down the ladder to address people who are nothing but a waste of their time, right? Barking back is not the quality of a great leader. You don't need to address everything. And when you are someone that feels the need to address everything, it shows me that you're not valuing your own presence. You're not valuing, your skill set and your ability. And this is one way that some leaders get drowned and drained, is because they give everything their attention and their energy. And the enemy would love nothing more than to distract you from what you need to get done, right? And so if you spend it, anytime someone makes a comment, anytime someone disagrees with you, I see it on Facebook all the time. I'm like, why are you barking back at people in your comment section? Like, just post what you need to post and move on. You don't need to defend yourself if you just stand by what you said, right? But people who are, oh, I can't believe they said that. I can't believe they did that. Or, you're constantly always annoyed by what other people are saying about you who don't agree with you. And you have to have that Nehemiah mindset, which is you're doing a great work and you cannot come down. Stop coming down to people's level. When you keep on coming down to people's level, you are showing me that you are too distracted to get work done. You're too distracted. If you spend time on the phone all the time complaining about what other people are talking about you or whatever, or how it could be family members, whatever, you are distracted. And you'll never get anything completely done because you're always talking about what someone else is doing, what someone else is saying. Who cares? Right? You need to focus on getting your work done. This is what I tell my kids all the time in my class. They love to get into, my kids are like 7, 8, and 9, and they love to get into just little things here and there in class. And I tell them, I said, listen, your focus is more valuable than what you think. If you can focus, you can get so many things done. But when you allow distractions to eat at you, you will only get a little bit of work done at a time because you're constantly working and then you get distracted, working and then you get distracted. You have to realize what Nehemiah said, which is this: I'm doing a great work and I can't come down. But you have to see what you're doing as a great work. You have to see it as a great work. Right? So that when people are not in your corner, or when things are not going at the pace you think that it needs to go, that you realize, listen, I'm still doing a great work. Right? Now, there's something with this I wanted to point out. And this is something that, again, I talk to my mentees a lot about different things, when they're leading in their business or, leading in ministry. And One of the things I tell them all the time is that you cannot depend on others to be the leader because it's not their job. And what I mean by this is there are some people who, I guess I'll just shoot straight. The job of a leader is to lead. And sometimes leaders get frustrated because they feel like the followers should be the leaders. And your job as a leader is to lead. And so, I sometimes I see my mentees or even leaders say, "Oh, I wish more people were in my corner. I wish more people would understand me." And I'm like, it's not people's job. It's not everybody's job to understand you. It's your job to show them and to teach them on how to understand what you're doing. But not everyone's going to understand what you're doing, because when it comes to vision, especially vision, I always say this: leadership literally is a ship. Leadership, you're leading people, and a leader's job is to take people to a destination. That's what vision is all about. Vision is about painting the picture and taking people there, right? So if my job is to paint the picture and take people there, well, then the people that get in the ship, their job is to follow what I'm doing, right? And so this is why sometimes, like, your frustration because people don't understand you, you got to get over that, because a leader, that's what comes with being a leader. Your job is to see what other people can't see. That's what makes you the leader. Your job is to create concepts in your business that make people go, "Oh, wow, like, yeah, that's your job. That's your job." It's not your customer's job. That's your job. It's not your parishioner's job. That's your job. So when we talk about business and ministry and all these different areas, right, of influence and impact, right? Sometimes leaders get frustrated because honestly, they don't even understand their own role. So, sometimes there's some criticism that is not criticism. Some people are just confused because they don't know where you're going. And they're like, what do I do? Right now, I'm not really addressing that today, but I did want to bring that up because I've had conversations with my mentees sometimes about this, where, they're like, "Oh, so-and-so asked me about this and I was offended. And because, why are they asking me this?" And I said, "Well, did you ever teach them that? Did you ever show them that? That's probably why they're asking those questions. Because you never showed them. So don't get offended. You need to figure out, okay, well, why did they ask that question? Now, if we knew it was coming from a place of ill intent, that's different. But if this is someone that has, always shown good faith in you and they just sincerely have a question, that is not criticism. That is actually a good question, because you're not showing them. Your job is to be the leader, right? So never get frustrated at the position of being a leader, because your job is to paint the picture. So I just want to point that out because I felt like that was super important and a lesson that I had to learn myself. So I wanted to talk about David. That was another person that I pointed out, his brother Eliab. So the story, right? David, before he goes to kill Goliath, he brings his lunch to his brothers, right, who are on the battlefield. And this is a perfect example of how people will criticize you and they don't even take the risk themselves. So David, right, finds out about Goliath, brings the lunch to his brothers, finds out about Goliath. His older brother Eliab is like, you're a little boy. Like, what are you doing over here, right? You're not going to do anything, right? And meanwhile, none of them had the courage to go out and kill Goliath. None of them. But they had the courage to judge David for having even an idea of, hey, I really want to take his head off, right? So this is what I have found. And this is real. I found this out maybe when I started really getting into, building up the platform God had given me and, those kind of things. There were always people who would say, after I would accomplish something, "Well, that's easy. Anybody can do that." And you know what I would always say when I would look at them? I said this in my head. I look at them, "You haven't built anything like what I've built that God has given me. Like, this is the real, like, I'm not here to compare, but how can you judge a tree with fruit and you have not done anything like what I'm doing?" Not to judge, but to realize that some people They would rather judge and not do anything. These are people who never, I always tell people, you don't want to be around people who are not willing to take risks. Those are dangerous people. Lazy people are dangerous people. And some people, it's not that they're even lazy, they do work too, but they don't have the level of faith to do things at a certain level like you do it. And so that's jealousy. Some people are jealous. Some people, they will say things about your movements because they wouldn't do it themselves. They wouldn't put in the work like you do. Again, not to judge, to put yourself higher, but sometimes you got to call a spade a spade. And as a leader, this is why I'm telling you have to stay focused, because so many people are really not doing anything in life. They really aren't. They really aren't going anywhere. They're like a hamster on a wheel. They're doing a lot of things and going nowhere. They're not producing true fruit. They're just busybodies. And you have to realize that a true leader is focused on real work, changing real lives, making real impact that is seen and many times unseen. And so again, going back to Nehemiah, I'm doing a great work. I cannot come down. When Eliab spoke to David, notice on how David did not go back home. David pretty much ignored what Eliab said and went back on that battle. He went on the battlefield and killed Goliath. Right? Because you know why? And I taught this years ago when I first did the ebook for my website a long time ago. It was a freebie on the Bible study about David. And one of the things that I taught was that the reason why David could kill Goliath in spite of being judged by his brothers, despite being seen as small, is because he had a righteous anger towards the right thing. And when you get on fire to address the troubles of this world that you know you were born to solve, when you know that you've been gifted and called and you have been anointed by God, like you have these real skill sets in this world to transform the world in whatever industry, arena, or whatever it is, when you see things that are not right, and you know that you've been called to bring justice to that area, whether you are work in the area of finance, and when you see problems in people's financial portfolios or in their corporations, whether it's consulting, health, education, whatever it is, and you're like, I can solve those problems. There's a righteous anger in you to say, you know what? I don't care what anyone says about me. I don't care what anyone says about the work I'm doing. I know I'm called to this, and I know I can solve these problems. There's something built in you that it's like David. David was like, who is this uncircumcised Philistine who is talking about God's people? He was more angered at what Goliath said than what Eliab said. And this is where I want to end, because to me, this is probably the most powerful point of my chat with y'all tonight, is that what are you more focused on? Are you more focused on the chatters of others that bear no weight, have no substance, and bear no fruit, versus the things that you're called to solve, that your giftings and callings can help to fulfill, right? It's like, I would rather slay Goliath than deal with the words of Eliab. And that's the mindset you have to have, because you got to realize, okay, why am I really here? Why am I doing this? What is the great work? It's like when Nehemiah, I'm here to build a wall. I'm not here to come down and address you. I'm here to build a wall, right? And when you realize that you are called to build the wall, you're not going to come down, right? You're not going to get caught up, right, on the this is y'all got to catch this. You're not going to get caught up on the foolishness of this world. You're not going to get caught up in what people are saying, because you have come to such a strong realization that I would rather focus on what God has called me to do, right, than to get caught up in things that are not worth my time, right? And so these are things that, like, again, I just want to address these things, because I really believe that for a lot of people, you're called, but you're distracted. right? You're called. I'm putting this in my Instagram. You're called, but you're distracted because you're allowing people to affect your ability to maneuver. Okay. So I'm going to hop over on Instagram real quick, but I really hope that this has helped some of y'all. I really hope that you're going to see just on how to navigate criticism, because for some of you, you're making big changes in your life and people are moving funny, they're moving different, and you have to realize, don't be affected by those people. Stay focused, don't come on the wall, y'all. Okay, don't not come down from the wall. So I love you guys so much. Be blessed. I'm gonna hop over Instagram and say hi to them, but I will see you guys soon. Remember, tomorrow night is a Speak Woman Speak Bible study we're having at 7 p.m. It's gonna be amazing on Zoom. Again, you can go to speakwomanspeak.org and you can sign up and become a member for free so that you can get the Reignite Bible study and catch us on Zoom tomorrow night. We have a new Bible study dropping through Speak Woman Speak next month. I'm super excited about it. I wrote this month, and I'm also going to be releasing the one that I wrote for November. It's going to be really interesting. It's not a Thanksgiving theme at all. It's actually focused on a particular woman in the Bible, and it's going to be really, really good, y'all. So stay tuned for that. And